It's time to talk game cameras. Today I want to talk to you about my preferred brand of game cameras and how it differs from all the other ones that are out there. Now, when game cameras first came out a number of years ago, did a little experiment and I bought one of the most expensive ones that were out there. I bought kind of a lower end and then the cheapest model that was out there. So in the first year of using them, the cheapest one didn't make it through the full season. Florida humidity is rough on all electronics. It probably plays a role in the longevity of any of these, but that one did not last long at all. The middle of the road one went 2 full seasons for me, but I think it was on the 3rd season I was using it. Something was wrong with the trigger. It would just take continual pictures till the batteries were dead. Just non-stop pictures. So that one didn't do too bad. Now the highest price camera that I bought, it was a SpyPoint Pro X. This is it here. It's about 8 to 10 years old. I forget exactly what year I bought it, but many years ago when they first came out. It's been a great camera. The whole front of it's faded out. Spent so much time in the woods, and as you can see, still works to this day. It has a nice LCD display on it, color display. You can watch movies right there in the woods with it. Some of the other features on all the SpyPoint cameras, I've used them since then over the years. SpyPoint puts out kind of like their base model. This is their G4. This is only 8 megapixels, where the Pro X was 12 megapixels. It does not have an LCD display, but still a very user-friendly setup to it. Sliding buttons to whether you want pictures, multi-shot, or videos. It's intuitive, very easy to use. This one's lasted probably 4 or 5 years for me. I had a second one of these that only lasted a couple years, but all my SpyPoints have always lasted a very long time for me. As I mentioned, the cheapest ones that were out there, not to name any names, you can just go online and look to see what the cheaper cameras are. They didn't last long for me. Just this year, I also got the SpyPoint Force B. This is a really nice camera. They've updated all the software and firmware in it. It has a little LCD display. You can do some quick viewing on it. It's very small, but it's just going to give you a good idea of what may have been out on your camera. The firmware in these, they've included both photo, video, and the time lapse, which you can set to take a picture every minute, every 30 seconds. If you're over a large plot field or something, it's all inclusive. Those plot watchers that came out about 3-4 years ago, those were fairly popular, but they worked that system right into their cameras, so one camera does everything for you. As you can see, they made them a little smaller. On the newer cameras, they've also expanded the motion sensor to be more convex. So it gets a little wider field of view, gives you a faster trigger time on your cameras. I have used other cameras out there. This here is a Bushnell camera that I have. It's one of the newer ones. It has the black flash, the convex motion sensor. It's software, has a row of buttons. Do need to look at the instructions a little bit. It's not quite as intuitive as SpyPoint's. They make it very easy. You don't even have to look at the instructions to use yours, but these are fairly easy to use. This was a 10 megapixel camera. Does a nice job taking some video and pictures. It's been a good camera. It does fairly well for me. You do need to use a very fast SD card in them because it's an HD quality camera. If you use one of the lower grade SD cards, the footage you're going to get is not going to be as well. One of the downfalls of these cameras, and it's actually a big downfall for me because all I hunt is public land. A lot of it comes down to this little piece of plastic right here. This is where you can lock your camera up from it being open and or lock it to a tree. Now, with all the SpyPoint cameras, they have a very large locking mechanism. It locks your camera closed. You can lock it to a tree. You put a nice beefy lock on there, hook your cable tie in it, goes around the tree, locks it up nice and solid for you. It is public land. Most of the time where I'm putting my cameras where I'm hunting, it's so far deep and back in there, rarely does anybody ever find them, but there's always that chance and you want to put a lock on your camera. Problem with this is these nice locks do not fit into the hole. Even a smaller lock, nice good solid master lock, also still does not fit through the hole. What you're left with is a little tiny lock. It's a master lock. It probably holds up fairly well. I haven't tried to break it open, but as you can imagine, it's not going to be as sturdy as this guy right here. The other downfall, because you have to use such a small lock, you really can't get both sides of your cable through it, so you got to get to some chain, something a little bit easier to fit two ends in to go around the tree. Going around the tree not only keeps people from walking off with it, it keeps the bears from walking off with the camera. So that's one of my big downfalls of it. Hopefully SpyPoint never changes them always putting in the nice big holes for locking up their cameras. So let's get down to the nitty-gritty of why we get cameras in the first place. Here's a video from the SpyPoint Force B. This is one of the newer models. It's got a nice 16:9 aspect ratio. Most of your newer HD cameras are going to give you this nice wide field of view. It does a good job in picking up contrast and definition both in the bright lit areas and the shadowed areas here. Same camera, same location. Just wanted to show you what the night views look like. You can pick up a lot of contrast down through there. It does a really good job. So earlier I said I wasn't going to name names on cameras, but in using pictures from other cameras as examples, they like to stamp their logo in the pictures to get free advertisement. So as you can see whose camera this is. But this is an example, not a bad field of view, depth of shot for this camera. This camera is only 2 years old. It's a friend of mine's. And I just want to give a comparison of the differences between the two cameras. As you can see, you're not seeing much outside of on the sides of this. It gets very dark, and the aspect ratio is a 4:3 instead of 16:9, so your field of view is a lot smaller as well. So the biggest problem that I have with some of the other brands of cameras, it's mostly in their firmware. Now there's a sensor that picks up light and decides whether to film in color or the black and white infrared modes. Now as you can see from this picture, very dark. You can pick up some color and light, but there's not a lot of contrast back in the picture. Here's another shot. You can see it's very light out, but the camera's still trying to film in daylight color, and you're just not picking up anything. Right over here, this is a bear standing, blocking out most of everything. But over here, if something tripped the camera, it'd be dark. If it was a deer, you probably wouldn't be able to see the antlers too well. You can't pick up much away from the camera under these conditions. Here's one. Still not the best shot. There's almost enough light. You can kind of make out the prints of the bobcat, make out a little bit more definition far away. But as you can see, things still get very dark and shadowed. So you're just not getting the same quality of contrast to really depict what's out there. So to show some difference here, this is some footage taken from my tree stand here. This is about 10 minutes after sunrise, actual time of sunrise. And I got a couple button bucks coming by. The footage is grainy because it's still fairly low light out. It's definitely easily for shooting light. It's well after the 30 minutes of sunrise. But I'm going to compare this to a video of the SpyPoint Force B. Once again, this is simultaneous footage of what I was just showing you. I had my game camera on the tree right down the trail these two button bucks were walking on. And as you can see, even though it was light enough to shoot and see and get some footage with a camcorder,
the game camera still sets itself up for a black and white nighttime infrared footage, and you can see much more contrast and detail. You can see the trees way back here. You can see that it's very light out. There's the bright spot coming through the trees there, but you can just make out much more detail both in the animals and the surroundings. And this is one of the things I really like about SpyPoint's cameras is their firmware always sets up to record even in low light conditions as a black and white to give us a better coverage. Here's this is actually the older SpyPoint, the G4 that I talked about earlier. Same situation again, a rainstorm in the middle of the afternoon triggered the camera, but it's recording in the black and white infrared and giving you much more contrast and details to definitely see what may be coming by your camera instead of just getting a very dark shadow picture of some silhouette, which is what we really want out of our cameras, is good pictures with good information, not just dark shadows. So here's some photographs from another brand of camera aside from the other one I was showing you that's not SpyPoint. These are some really nice pictures here. This is out of Ocala. It does a good job. It's got the 16:9 aspect ratio and great night pictures, a lot more definition. Daytime pictures very good as well. But this camera also has the same problems at dusk and dawn of giving you dark shadowed color pictures instead of sticking to the black and white infrared, giving you much more contrast and detail at those low light periods. Still a nice camera here. It's a nice buck here. I'm going to do a video later on updating my Ocala hunts from this year. And I have some interesting information about this buck and the other ones that you just saw here. Check for that video in a little bit. So a few last things on cameras, and this kind of is in regards to setting them up. You can get a great camera, spend a lot of good money on it, and if you don't set it up well, you're still not going to get the best pictures or videos from it. Now, most of your modern high-def cameras now have gone to the convex motion sensor, especially since the aspect ratio of your newer cameras is 16:9. It's a wider field of view, so you need to pick up the deer sooner to make sure you capture them on video. The old sensors were just a flat one and had a much more narrower field of view, but so did the lenses. So here, just giving you some examples, these black lines are the field of view of your motion sensors, and typically they're going to line up with the field of view of the camera lens as well. And here's our camera here, this little box. So if you set your camera up too close to a deer run, say 10 feet, maybe even less, as that deer crosses and triggers the camera, it's liable, even with the fast trigger speeds of milliseconds on them for some of these, it doesn't take long for that deer to step across the few feet and be out of the field of view, and sometimes you only catch the tail end of the deer. You get the hind quarters or something, and you don't even know what it was, whether it was just does walking by or a buck. So it's always a good idea to take your camera and set it back about 30-40 feet's a good distance. The sensors on these go out to 50 or 60 feet. So at 30 or 40, you're well within the range. It's going to pick it up. And when an animal, particularly a deer, enters over here, the camera is going to start either recording or taking its multi-shots of photographs. Plenty of time for it to make its way across and capture it before it gets out of the field of view. So that's an important thing. No matter how good of a camera you have, it's always important to set it up so you can capture the animals you're looking for and understand the limitations of the camera. Sometimes you get a tree where you have a deer run that comes this way, and that makes it much easier to have them trigger it early and stay within that range for a much longer period of time as they walk past. But sometimes you have to go on a broadside shot, so you want to be sure you don't set your camera up too close to something. So still one last thing I do want to mention, I have not been paid by SpyPoint asked by SpyPoint, nor have I received any promotional goods from them. I did this video simply just to take my experiences and things that I've noticed about the different cameras and pass this information on to everyone else out there so you can make some informed buying choices. I know money's always a factor, but there's also, you get what you pay for in most things in life. So take it easy out there. Good luck with all your hunting.